I think we gotta throw some people under the bus.
Like your TV show, what is it called?
Dog Times.
This is the original Leica Summicron, a design that they invented in 1953, and it is the collapsible version, and we've seen some interesting companies put out their own version of this. Now, I'm all for brands copying other brands. All artists copy all artists. Don't lie to yourself, you've done it. Some of us do it without even realizing we're doing it. It's just the reality of it. We have these brands like Light Lens Lab that literally builds their entire company off of ripping off old lens designs. And this new company called TIPOC is also jumping on this Light Lens Lab bandwagon of ripping off old lens designs. And that's what they've done with their latest Eureka lens, an exact copy of the very first Leica Summicron ever, made by Ernst Leitz himself in the Wetzlar factory in Germany. You'll have to forgive the old German accent. My original name is Van den Havel, and I'm a little bit rusty. This specific one is from 1954. I gotta give a shout out to our friend of the channel, Daniel. I got this lens off of him in a trade that we did, and now he's buying it back from me. He's buying it today, actually. I'm just not a fan of the 50mm focal length. So a lot of the photos I'm gonna show you today are quite boring, but I do have examples that I've taken with the Leica M10, and we'll dive into those in a minute. But first, let's share some facts about the very first Summicron ever. So it is made up of 7 elements. It's known for its low contrast look. This lens in particular was born out of the Leitz laboratory, their first time creating their own glass. So it was their first glass laboratory, and this was the first lens to come out of that. The interesting thing about this particular lens is that it was made with rare earth materials, specifically lanthanum. And that is why if you find any version of this lens and it is less than $1,000, it's because the optics are probably destroyed, because lanthanum made the glass very, very soft. And Daniel is actually the one that gave me the heads up on this, because if you look at all the ones on eBay, they are scratched all to hell. So he has always had this original UV Leica filter on this. It is the Leica normal 39 diameter filter thread, by the way. This lens is very easy to destroy because of those rare earth materials, but it's also because of the lanthanum that makes it such a unique performer. It does have a pretty wicked vignette, like a lot of early Leica M mount lenses do. This one is actually a Leica thread mount because it is the older generation, the first Summicron ever. Did I mention that? You can easily adapt it to Leica M. If you do that, I highly recommend getting a 6-bit coded adapter. It'll just make your life a little easier. As you can see, this one is not 6-bit coded, but that's okay. I'm just not a fan of the 50mm focal length, but I thought I'd give it a whirl. The heavy vignetting does go away once you stop it down to 5.6, so that's pretty good. From f2 all the way to 5.6, you're gonna have a pretty wild vignette, but you know, that's kind of popular in our hipster generation nowadays anyways. It is pretty gnarly when ripped wide open at f2, as you can see here. This lens is not perfect. It does suffer from astigmatism and a pretty heavy field curvature. But again, that might be one of the beauties of this lens. You know, the reality is you just don't get lenses like this in 2024, even when you're trying to rip off the design. Now, some downsides of it is very sensitive to flare, as are most Leica M lenses in my experience, unless you get the really, really new ones. Beauty of this little guy is that it has a 10-blade iris, and there are 2 versions of this that have a 16-blade iris. So when ripped wide open at f2 with that 10-blade iris, you can get some really nice bokeh in the background. It is a very unique lens. The biggest downsides, in my opinion, are: 1, it's silver. I'm not a fan of silver lenses. It just attracts way too much attention, especially out on the street, although it's almost damn near impossible to shoot street the way that I do with a 50mm focal length anyways. But here's the prime reason, prime example of why I don't like using silver lenses. And bink, blinded. So that's exactly why right there. It's just not ideal, is it? You know, that's not exactly being a discreet street photographer if you're gonna blind someone with a beam of light. The other downside is this kind of, you know, this collapsible, this always tripped me up, man. I'm just not used to it. Not only do you have to pull it out, but then you have to spin it, right, before it becomes able to focus properly and to properly read and use the iris. It's an awkward thing. I found it very cumbersome, hindering at times. I always forgot to twist it when I pulled it out. So you get some pretty gnarly out of focus pictures. It's one of those things where you're like, ah, damn, I forgot to spin it. Just adds a little extra chore that you have to do. So it's a two-step process, and that's part of what tripped me up a lot, is you pull it out and then you forget to spin it. Another glaring issue with having a lens like this for digital sensors, it's basically like creating a plunger that sucks in dirt and dust from the outside directly onto your digital sensor. For analog cameras, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, but still, you know the old saying, check the gate. And now we'll jump in and we'll talk about some of the boring images that I took with this lens. We're just gonna jump in here real quick and start looking at these photos. These were all taken on the Leica M10. It's a little tricky taking photos of pets that are playing fetch. Plus too, this is a rangefinder Leica camera, right? So there's no autofocus. It's all up to me and the whipping of the focus lever. There's a couple things here to take notice of, right? So we have the wild bokeh, and I mean, you can just see the very kind of painterly quality of it. There's no hard edges. One or two, maybe few cat eyes you can kind of spot, but what really stands out is the astigmatism of the lens. So basically what that means is, you notice how there's like parts of like the foreground that are sharp in focus down here, and yet the very center name tag there is pretty dang sharp. And you know, you could argue that's the dead center of the lens. And then as we get closer to the outside of the center, it really starts to fall off the focus, and it falls off very, very quickly. But there's this kind of weird thing. You notice how like the foreground is kind of sharp and then it just kind of drifts. The reason why it's doing that kind of focus shift is due to the field curvature. It's a little extreme on this old lens. Certain elements of the foreground will be in focus more than some parts of the center. Here it's not too bad. That is something to be aware of with this lens. Here you'll notice it too, but these are actually, I mean, the thing is sharp, you know, I mean, it really is a sharp, sharp lens. Here's another one ripped wide open. Here you can start to see a little tiny, but this is what I mean. There's not a lot of cat eyes here. There's not a lot of hard-edged bokeh. Me, personally, I love that. Hard-edged bokeh to me, or they call it the soap bubbles, it's really well-defined bokeh. To me, that looks cheap. To me, that looks like a dead ringer for a photo lens, right? I mean, this kind of quality on this old Leica lens is really quite cinematic in all honesty. I'm not just saying that. I know how, you know, everyone is a little, they're a little iffy when they hear that word cinematic, but the reality is, to me, that is a true cinematic quality of a lens, is when it has this kind of really painterly bokeh, where it just looks like, it looks like this bokeh was made with a paintbrush, almost, you know, the way that it just perfectly blends together. I much prefer that than hard-edged bokeh, like a soap bubble bokeh lens that you get out of a lot of cheap photo lenses, quite honestly. I mean, look at this. You know, this is a great shot too that I just managed to capture this in the dog. Now, obviously this is an f8. This is color graded. Okay, so, you know, I tend to add grain to my digital photos. So that's what's going on here when you really zoom in, but quite sharp on the puppy here, you know, jumping really high in the air there. I want to give you an idea. Here we are with lots of light, also f8, obviously. You know, it's maintaining really nice sharpness. But a great example of this is these guys up on the roof. Now, this photo was taken from this photo. Okay, so you can see this is the photo, and then boom. Now, again, this is only a 24 megapixel sensor on the M10, so, but the lens itself is just really pushing those 24 megapixels to the max, and I bet it would do damn quite well with maybe the M10R, the M11, you know, with even more megapixels. So these old lenses can really hold it down with our natural resolution. These guys are all sharp tack. Especially her. This is just zone focusing on the street there, just random crappy photo there. I wanted to see if there were more examples to show. Now, I showed this earlier through the video to show the flare. So this right here, that is a flare actually running across the lens. And then up here at the top, we got a lot of flare. And the reason why I took this photo is because this was a backlit kind of situation. You know, the sun is coming down this way, totally striking the lens. So I knew that if it was gonna flare, but it didn't really flare in the way that I thought it would. It just kind of washed it out, right? So again, that is something to be aware of. There's not a lot of ability to maintain the contrast when you're in a backlit situation. But sometimes it does quite well, right? I'm just kind of thumbing through these. Here's another issue. I showed this earlier during the talking head. You can notice that's the flare. And that's also a thing that can happen from the astigmatism of the lens as well. Some interesting kind of this kind of weird thing where it goes this way, the flare is going this way, and then it's going this way, and it's got like a rainbow streak to it. That's also a side effect of the astigmatism. This is f16 here, all the way down. So you'll notice, and what we're seeing here is another example of that field curvature, right? It's having some issues a little bit on, you know, the focus point. You know, f16, you would think, well, more of this should be in focus, but again, it's a 50mm lens, so we can't be too hard on it. But this is a great example of the sharpness of the lens. And also the reason why I showed it earlier is because of the very low con look. Obviously this is at a deep f-stop, f8. I don't really ever shoot beyond f8. I just did that railroad at f16 for the example, but this is just beautifully sharp. Again, only 24 megapixels on the M10 sensor, and that lens is easily going to surpass the 24 megapixels. Here's another great one, just beautiful sharpness. And when I color grade, I actually take away clarity. So you're actually getting way more out of the lens than what's shown here. I mean, just look at this. It's just beautiful. Really good performer in my opinion, especially for it being one of the very first, I mean, literally the first Summicron lens. But this specific one is one of the first ones. And I mean, just look at the sharpness on this. And this is with clarity dumbed down. I pull back the clarity like -12. I just do that with all my photos to take the digital edge off. And it's just, you wouldn't even be able to tell I did it on this. It's just beautiful. So I just wanted to kind of talk about that real quick, show the kind of sharpness on like, you know, directly looking from the computer side of things and looking at some of these and just really saying, wow, I mean, just look at the performance of this lens, whether it's stopped down at f8 like that right there, or when she's, you know, ripped wide open at f2. I think it was a really well-performing lens. I'm just not a fan of the collapsible design of it. There is some interesting shots. I did a series on my uncle's salvage yard, and I wanted to show, let me get to that. This is a wonderful example of the sharpness of the lens. I absolutely love the way this photo turned out, and the whole thing just beautiful. Again, f8 on that. This one was out of focus because of the collapsible problem, not pulling it out all the way. Super sharp on this sign here. And let me go to the salvage yard, because there were some interesting things happening in the salvage yard here. If I can find it. Here's my ode to Robert Frank here. Beautiful performer lens though. Here you can see, now this is at f4, this goofy shot I took of my uncle here, and again, even at f4, you know, we're just starting to see a couple stop signs here, you know, but it's nice. It's keeping the shape and that nice kind of smooth bokeh. I really appreciate that, and I think that's just a telltale sign of a Leica lens, you know. There were some good ones in here though, where I shot it a little bit shallower. See if I can get to it. Here's another example. Obviously, the focus is on this car. Primarily, I was living at an f4 this day out here in the salvage yard, so you can see that. Let's see, where was I? Here's a good example. So this is, again, this is f4. This is, again, another example of that weird field curvature. It's just kind of interesting, you know, like all of this is really nice tack sharp down here. Obviously, the focal point was on the front of the car. That's why this is so sharp. Look how sharp we are here. But then it just, boom, instantly falls off in the background. Now, that's a cool characteristic, though. I mean, look how quick it loses there. The interesting thing is when you pull out and look at it, you're like, it looks like the bottom part is in focus, the center part, and then the back goes out of focus. It almost looks like there was like a gradual window put on the top half of this photo, but there wasn't. So again, that's another characteristic of that weird field curvature and the astigmatism, just very unique to that specific lens. Here you feel a little bit of it, you know, like the focus is here, right here. So the focus is on the car here, but all of this stuff is in focus, but none of this is, and even some of this part over here looks tack sharp. You know, it's just so odd. Like the focus is kind of shifted out and beyond, but almost like scattered. Again, the field curvature. Trying to see if there's any more examples of this in here. This one I showed earlier, but really just to show the bokeh. This is at f4 again. So that's something to look out for. You know, the field curvature is not always only going to be focused on the focal plane itself, right? Because normally the focal plane, that whole plane within the image is what's in focus. So then the foreground and background beyond or before that focal plane will be soft. You're not always going to get that with this field curvature characteristic. You know, it kind of shifts a little bit. Here you can see, I know this one's getting a little blown out, but you can just kind of feel that painterly, it just looks like little dabs with the paintbrush back here. Really cool. Really cool, nice lens. I mean, maybe I'll have to find one that's black and doesn't collapse. And I think I actually really might like the lens because I just love this kind of painterly quality of the out of focus areas. I mean, look at this back here. I'm a huge, huge fan of it. I really am. I don't like the design, the collapsing, and I don't like the silver. But as a lens in general, if you're not bothered by the collapsible design and you're not bothered by a silver lens, I think this is a great lens. I really do. I mean, once you use it, you're just like, wow, man, it's got some great qualities. I mean, look how tack sharp. This is us both moving. Obviously, it has a lot to do. I did like 1/4000th of a second here. We're moving in the car. This guy is moving, not nearly as fast as us because he's on a little tiny e-scooter. But I mean, just look at the tack sharpness of this. And this is an f8, right? So again, this is me zone focusing on the fly. So we're still able to get a little bit of separation from him from the background because of the, you know, the zone focusing. But man, the fact like how tack sharp he is. And again, this is -12 clarity, right? I always pull the clarity back. So keeping that in mind, I mean, this is really quite something. And then also like 24 grain is put on top of it. So I kind of have like my own way of gnarling up these digital photos, but just really, really impressive. Especially for a lens from 1954. I mean, look, you can see him kind of looking at me like, hey, man. Quite nice. It doesn't handle these backlit situations at all. I mean, you can see that from the examples, but you know, that in my experience, that's with a lot of Leica M lenses. They just can't handle the backlight sometimes. That's why a lot of them came with hoods and things. So that's something to keep in mind too with that version 1 collapsible Summicron. There's no built-in hood or anything like that. There's no hood option. So that's something to be aware of. So I have left some eBay affiliate links for this Summicron version 1 down in the description. But like I said, man, you're gonna have to really do your due diligence and really look at those photos. Ask the seller questions. Someone gave me a tip once. They said, if the seller's rating is less than 99%, you shouldn't buy anything from them. And that's a really good tip because now anytime I see an eBay seller with less than a 99% rating, I always look at their neutral and negative reviews and you'll find some interesting things. And I know from being someone that has been kicked off of eBay, I know like how hardcore they are. They definitely favor the buyers, okay? But that is to the buyer's advantage, especially for guys like us buying old vintage lenses in other parts of the world. Do your research on the seller and ask them lots of questions. If they don't want to answer any questions, well, that's a red flag. But I would certainly look at the glass, check for the scuffs, check for the marks, because again, that lanthanum makes the glass so super soft. And people don't know that. And just even with a Kimtech wipe, you have now definitely scratched the lens and potentially, you know, destroyed it beyond repair. Because also, there's not a whole lot of guys out there that can perform a proper CLA on Leica lenses and actually polish the glass the right way, like how they used to do at Steve's Camera over in Culver City. But sadly, I guess he retired. So, but the links are still down there to help you fast track. If I find any on MPB or whatever, I'll have the links down below to try to fast track your all's research. And obviously, that's a great way to support the channel at no extra charge to anyone. I just thank you for sticking around.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Has the infinity lock right there. You can see that. Just like the old Gary Winogrand Canon LTM, Canon Serenar had the... So it's a very old school Leica thread mount kind of design with that lock. Some people love this collapsible design. I don't find it very practical, you know, because my 40mm Summicron is smaller than this, and it's not a collapsible.